Chapter 9, Preying on the Children. I grew up with Christian parents and we had boundaries. It has taught me to use boundaries in my adult life as well, the host added. It does help when you're raised with guidelines, Donna added. Without them, lines get blurred. She continued, I grew up the youngest of 5 children. The oldest sibling is 16 years older than me. I grew up with my nieces and nephews, so my discipline was nothing like my siblings. I was an honor student until I hit high school, where I quickly had them take me out of the honors classes. I wanted to work instead of hanging out at the school with extracurricular activities. I would graduate on time and be the first one in my family. My dad was pushing me to go to college, but I got married and had children instead. My first husband, Lonnie, and I worked together when I was still in high school. We worked at a local pizza shop. He had just graduated and was a couple years older than me. After my graduation, I realized I was pregnant and we got married. Soon after having Elizabeth, her brother Alex would come along. It was not an easy marriage. As I mentioned earlier, he was religious and I was at that time just a secular believer. I had no idea what I was supposed to do as a wife, much less a mother. I did not know how to cook, clean, or even budget money. I knew I could physically care for my children because I had been an aunt since I was 3. Heck, I had diaper changes and bottles down. However, I had no idea how to discipline them correctly. I was a terrible parent. I wanted to be my children's friend instead of their mother. I would catch myself trying to please them because I did not want them mad at me. It was not until I was fasting and praying that God showed me how wrong it was to be the friend of my children. As a friend, we condone behaviors that parents would not approve of, and my job was to correct them no matter what their age. I birthed them and I am responsible for them. God had shown me that even though Jesus was a grown man, his mother was still his mother. The role of parents does not shift, just like the role of our Father does not shift. We are always in need of correction. Understanding that we are still the children of our Father makes it easier to submit to the Lord. I had a conversation with Elizabeth the other day when she had done something inappropriate. I'd asked her not to do it again, and I told her it was something I had taught her that was wrong. We as parents make mistakes. However, that does not mean we should ignore rectification when it comes around. We need to own up to our mistakes and show our children. We aren't hiding our shame, we are making it right. I realize that one cannot be a good parent without the Lord. I remember reading an article on Abraham Lincoln and the education he had growing up. Most would think that the President of the United States of America would have at least some kind of post high school education, even back in the day. However, Mr. Lincoln did not. His only education was the Bible and some elementary classes. Although he grew up poor and uneducated, he was one of the greatest presidents, as he freed those who had been in bondage. When I realized that, I was floored. I realized that education is secularized. We need to understand the Bible, not man's written words. Our foundation for truth is based upon man's books, not God's. History classes should be steeped in Bible study, not Greek mythology. That was the one I took in junior high. We were taught about pagan gods and not about our Creator God. I had once stated on my social media that the Bible should be the only history book taught in schools, and someone went off. It triggered them so much they blocked me from their lives. Everything God wants us to know is there in one place, and it's super packed. Ecclesiastes 1:9 states, The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Learning the Bible and about our country should be the classes we teach in our schools. Learning about the Bible and getting closer to God should be available in all school systems as well. How awesome would it be to have a Bible study class and prayer rooms at the schools? When I was in Encountering Jesus School, our assignment each night after we completed our Bible study was to go sit in the prayer room. Now, this sounds like an easy task, just like adding the Bible to your home, but the devil is all around and does not want us to listen to our Father. I remember the first couple of weeks we went to the prayer room, as it was taxing for some students. We would go to the prayer room for up to 2 hours, but after a few minutes, I would see some get up and leave, then a couple more that were going in and out of the room. I knew what was happening, however, they could not see it. One night during studies, our teacher made the statement that those who were up and down and leaving early needed to sit and stay in the room. You could see the faces of those having issues with staying. We began discussing the issues that some were feeling when they sat in the spirit filled room. Feelings of convictions were popping up. Instead of dealing with those convictions with the Lord, the students would run. Like Adam and Eve, they would hide from God. Some had demons that we had delivered them from, and some had unforgiveness. However, I love the feeling of the prayer room. In that quiet place, calm and peace would come over me. During the year of my fasting, I was needing the peace of the prayer room brought when I was in EJS, so God instructed me to put the Bible on in my home. The peace it brings to our home is very noticeable. I've had guests come and not want to leave. They claim they sleep better, and they get love from the Lord. I've also had people come in and walk back out of the house because of the convictions they were getting from the Lord. Funny how God affects us all, yet many cannot see it. During this fasting time, God was lighting me up with ideas as well. I tried to open a storefront, but that was not anointed, and God fixed it for me. However, He was showing me a bigger picture. I once received this prophecy about how I had healing in my hands and in my words. I did not understand that for years until I began my fast, pray, heal journey. During this time, I began making toppings for my homemade yogurt, writing children's books, perfecting my bone broth recipes, and designing shirts. I felt the urge to educate and share God's message like never before. I did not know I could even write for children, but God said I could. The more I fasted and prayed, the more blueprints were being dropped in my heart. I had a lot happening during the year of my fasting and prayer. My daughter Elizabeth had been unfortunately incarcerated, and my grandchildren were whisked away to another state, yet I still had peace and strength. Strangely, I was calm, and it looked like the world was crumbling around us. I was also a warrior. I guess it was something my mother passed down. I remember as a child, even around the age of 10, if a storm came through town, I would have my mom take me to my sister Linda to make sure she and her 3 boys were safe. I always worried about her and her children. They were like my boys, except I was too young. As I got older, I would watch the weather and alert my grown children in the middle of the night for potential warnings. I had faith issues for sure. I had fear of running out of gas as well, no matter whose car I was in. I kept an eye on my gas tank, and if I was in someone else's car, I would check theirs. When my children were little, if they spent the night somewhere, I left my door unlocked just in case they had to bring them home in the middle of the night. I was a hot mess. I worried about everything. This was something that needed to go away, but without Jesus, it was not possible. I've been praying about my worrying and asked the Lord to take it from me. I decided to give faith a chance and let God reform me. I guess I did not realize that the Lord had been working on me when one day, in the middle of nowhere, my gas warning light came on in the car I was driving. My sister Sandra and I had been out delivering bone broth and yogurt. We had taken it to a family member who lived a couple of hours away. Most of the way, it was just a small highway with pastures, a few houses, and a store or two. Rural Texas. Anyhow, on this particular day, we were talking and going along when I heard a ding. Now, this was my husband's vehicle, and it dings for everything. I said aloud, I wonder what was dinging. I looked down at the gauge, and there was the low fuel light on. I just started laughing. Sandra, confused, asked what the ding was for, and I told her low fuel. She said, well, that's not funny. She was referring to the fact that we were in the middle of nowhere. I realized when I saw the light on that I never even checked the gas gauge. The fear of running out of gas had been taken from me, and I knew at that moment God was transforming me. Just then, the host broke in saying, awesome that God took your fears like that. Nana responded, I was very happy to give it to him. I was exhausted from worrying all those years. Nana continued, we're not giving a spirit of fear, and that is something most do not understand. Fear is not an emotion, but a spirit, as in demonic. Negative emotions are demonic energies that hang around, waiting for us to agree with them. Take, for instance, anger. God talks about how he would send a spirit in when David played the harp for Saul. Now, Saul would take the bait and let it overcome him, leading him to try to kill David. Demons are real, and we need to understand that God gives us good spirits. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. These are the ones we need to pray for the Holy Spirit to bring us and surround us with, and to not be tempted by the evil one. Jack was never one to understand demonic forces and these types of spirits. His family was not into religion, the Bible, or anything godly, and mine was into tarot cards, horoscopes, astrology, and whatever else his witches like. I used to think in high school that the girl in all black was the witch. However, I knew more than the witches. I was being groomed for the devil, but those plans would be tossed. My parents did not take me to church. The first time I went was with my aunt and my cousins. Most of my family was either agnostic or atheist, even though we never used those terms. My parents said they knew who God was, but did not worship him. Just a note, both of my parents gave their lives to Jesus before they died. Thank you, Lord Jesus. I was around 8 the first time I went to church. I loved it. I remember watching the lightning and talking to it as a child. I knew something bigger was out there, but I had no idea who or what his name was until I got to go to church. I finally had a name for the light I questioned so many times. His name was God, and he was my father. At church, we sang and did Bible studies. We ate donuts and drank chocolate milk on the church bus that I rode every Sunday. I was hooked on Jesus. I went for a couple of years. I even got to go to church camp one summer. My aunt and my cousins eventually stopped going, and it was just me. Then my pastor and his wife divorced. I was crushed. I loved them like my parents, and on top of it, my youth pastors left as well. Because my family church was gone, I left and did not look back. Being so young and alone, I did not know that this was the devil's plan for me, to abandon my beliefs. Sad how the devil can deceive a 10-year-old child. He made me think I was forsaken by God. Man left us, not God. However, it took me almost 40 years to figure that out. I wanted my parents to go to church with me. My dad worked nights, so he was not up during the daylight hours. My mother worked at the school, so she was always home with me. I would ask her to go, but she always had an excuse. I remember one year when Mother's Day was coming up, and I wanted my mom to go to church with me and then out to eat, like the families always did every Sunday. Of course, I got the same excuse. No dress or shoes to wear and no money to buy them. Well, that was what my mom thought, but God had another plan. The Friday before Mother's Day, my mom, my sister Sandra, my niece, and I went out for a walk. My mom and sister were ahead of me and my niece, who is 3 years younger than me. She and I grew up like sisters and did many things together until I became a teenager. We were walking along the side of the street when I noticed something on the ground in front of us. As I approached it, I realized it was money, some kind of bill. Now, my mom and sister had completely walked over it, but I spotted it. I stopped and picked it up and realized it was a $50 bill. This was the late 1970s, and $50 could go a long way. Nothing else entered my mind about this money except the fact that my mom was getting a new dress and we were going to church. I started hollering, "I found $50," and my mom and sister turned around. I ran up with the bill in my hand and said, "Mom, you can go to church with me now." She looked stunned as I stood there with a $50 bill in my hand. That is worth almost $200 today, so I'm sure Mother could have found other things to spend it on, but I had already claimed it for her. She got the dress and shoes, and we got to eat out with all the families that Mother's Day. God has always been there in my life and doing things for me, but I did not even know his name until I was 8, when I went to church for the first time. Crazy how we think Christianity is everywhere, but a child in America does not know our Father's name. I was taught to write Santa Claus letters, even in school, but no one taught me to pray to the one true Father. I remember talking to the lightning. Sounds funny, but growing up in Texas, we have some amazing storms. As a child, I loved these storms. Even though I was a worrier, storms have so much energy and the atmosphere changes when one is approaching. Dad and Mom had big glass sliding doors in their room. I always slept in there because Dad was gone at night to work. I would look out those doors and watch the sky for lightning. I was not afraid of it. My children and I were in a trailer home when lightning struck less than 50 feet from us. It was beautiful. It hit the driveway outside the window. It was pink and massive. We stood there in awe. Another time in the same home, lightning struck the power line and the meter burned up. It had such a surge in the home that the fans were whirling and the lights were glowing. Again, we were awestruck. I had been electrocuted by faulty camper wiring as a child. One evening, my dad, my brother Roger, and my sister Sandra and her husband John were out in the camper getting ready for deer season. My mother sent me out to get a cigarette for my dad for her. I remember seeing my dad and them in the window of the camper sitting at the table working on their equipment. As I approached, I noticed the window was open. I walked up to the window and started talking. I reached up and grabbed the frame of the window and everything stopped. I could see, almost in slow motion, their looks when they realized I was stuck in the window. The camper had not been properly grounded and I was caught in the circuit. No one could touch me, as they would be caught as well. They ran out the camper door, and my brother-in-law kicked me off the camper. I was unfazed, finished my sentence that Mom needed a cigarette, and went back into the house. This may be why I produce lots of static. I am notorious at home for killing electronics. Going to church and learning the name of my father were the best times as a child. After my church split, I never went to another. I would visit my friend's church every once in a while, but her family was no better than mine. Mine showed no religion, and her family would go hot and cold from month to month. I did not have friends whose whole families went to church until I got a little bit older. Then I had a friend. I spent the summer with her and her family. She was my best friend at junior high. Their family was nothing like my family. You would think living in the Bible Belt that more families would go to church. However, I was not from the area, so the people who we knew were not conservatives but progressive. We moved to Texas when I was a year old. My siblings' ages ranged from 17 to 6 years of age. The oldest, Sandra, was almost 17. I was still a toddler, so I do not recollect the move. I do recall my family talking about other families from California moving to the same area. When my parents moved, so did my dad's best friend and his family. Soon after, my uncles, aunts, and cousins were living in the same area. To me, this was the only place I knew, and my family was all around me. Growing up, we were a progressive family in values. I did not know this term or what it meant until a few years ago when I realized God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. However, as a family, we did everything together. We had celebrations, holidays, vacations, and nearly every weekend in the summer, we could spend days together hanging out and playing. They were my family and friends. There were not too many outsiders in our group. However, we welcomed all. My mom used to make huge breakfasts on the weekend, and if you came over, you could eat. I remember my sister Linda's brother-in-law would always just happen to come over during these times and conveniently be hungry. Our dad was a Dallas Cowboy fan. In Texas, we all are. We just don't always claim it. I was always told that you were a Cowboys fan until you died, whether they are good or bad. Sometimes I think he coached the team the way he would yell at them on the field. This was always a fun time in our home. My dad was a technological geek and always had a big screen televisions, camcorders, home computers, and so many fun things growing up. We were not poor, but we were not rich. We lived comfortably, and I wanted for nothing. I asked for lots, but I never did without. Football season in our home meant you had to stay clear of the view of the television no matter how big the screen. The men would yell at you if you got in their view of the television, and you never interrupted the game. My sister Tabitha, who had just gotten her license and was a distracted driver, was pulling out of our driveway one afternoon during a Dallas game when she slammed the car right into the house. Now, the house, the car, and my sister were fine. However, she interrupted the game. My dad was not happy. I thought it was hilarious that she hit the house, but he did not think it was so funny. She was a terrible driver. She scared me when she drove. One night when she was driving so fast, we hit a dip and the hubcap flew off. She just kept on going, but I kept a mental list. I kept this list on my siblings because they were mean to me. I would gather intel on them and feed it to my dad and my mom. My sisters, who were 6 and 8 years older than me, would try to deter me, but I did not trust them. They were always plotting ways to get rid of me, like Joseph's brother in the Bible. Since I was so much younger than my siblings, they got to watch me a lot. On weekends, we would go to the skating rink. I was 5 when I began skating with my sisters. They had their friends who were almost teenagers. I know they did not like this, as I cramped their style, so, of course, many times they would be mean. They would have me ask inappropriate questions just so the other person would come after me. One time, Linda had me ask her teenage boyfriend if he was gay. Now, I was a child and had no idea what that meant. I remember skating up to him and asking him, I saw his face change, so I took off on my skates as fast as my little legs would go. I realized that what I had asked him was not nice, but I had no idea what it meant. I remember my sisters watching and laughing as this tall, long legged teenager was chasing a small kindergarten aged child around the skating rink. I loved all my sisters, however, Linda was my favorite growing up. I shared a room with Tabitha, who was 6 years older than me. She was boy crazy, and that was all she wanted to be around and talk about. Linda, she liked to draw and write. She was the artsy one of the family. Out of the five siblings, she and I were the only ones who had brown hair and hazel eyes like our mom. The others had black hair and brown eyes like my dad. Linda's hair was long and curly. I loved her curly hair. I remember she was in high school and taking cosmetology classes. She was permitted by my mom to give me a perm. It did not turn out pretty like hers. My hair fried and was nothing but frizz. She also stayed up late watching old black and white movies. I thought she was cool because she was not like my other sister. Linda was always pushing the boundaries with my dad. Many times she would have to go and change because dad did not like her clothes. I got that. She liked her pants tight and her shorts short. She was the typical 70s hippie. One night she told me she ran away. I was intrigued by this because I did not hear her get in trouble. She said she got bored the other night and ran away. She was out all night until she got bored and came home and went to bed. She was a rebel, and I was thrilled by this. She liked to hang out with me. Many nights I would go to her room to sleep with her. When she moved out and Dad started working nights, I then started sleeping in my mom's room with her until I was older. Linda got pregnant in high school. She married her boyfriend and they had 3 children together. I was their designated babysitter. I was a teenage girl with 3 kids on my hip every weekend and all summer long. I spent lots of times with Linda. In fact, up until I was married, I watched the boys when she worked and I wasn't working. I thought it was my job to care for her and the boys. No one told me I was a child and that I had my own life. When I got older and started working, I usually worked with my sister Linda. She was like my mother. It was a strange hold she had on me. She hated Lonnie and wanted Elizabeth to raise her as a daughter. She even hid her away from me and her dad when Elizabeth was around 12. I did not understand that this was a demonic stronghold in my life. My marriage seemed doomed from the beginning because he and Linda did not like each other. I felt like I was being pulled in 2 directions. The crazy thing is, neither one of them are in my life anymore. Linda lost her middle child due to a drug overdose. This left her different. It made us all different. He was one of the kiddos I had on my hip as a child myself. Many things have happened since his death. Some things are just wrong, and I cannot find myself condoning that behavior anymore. I felt as though when I allowed things to happen in front of me, I condoned the behavior. God has shown me that these are boundaries I needed to have in my life to cut the negative out. Unfortunately, most negativity comes from those closest to you. When you are raised in an ungodly home, negative seems to be the main topic. Secrets were our specialty. I knew when I saw my mom outside my school to pick me up, she had a secret bill to go pay. She had a secret account so my dad would not get mad at her spending. They always kept separate bank accounts. However, he did not know all the bills she had until he retired and paid them off. I picked up on their secret accounts and ran with it. I figured if my husband did not know, it did not matter. One time I used my husband's truck as my collateral. The title was not even in my name, but I worked in finance, so I knew bankers that would change it for me. I had taken out a small loan, however, I lost my job due to a buyout. My payment got behind, and sure enough, someone came and repossessed the truck. Now, I was not in the state, as we were in the middle of making a major move when they came and got it. My husband was there when they came, and he was not happy. Secrets. You would have thought I would learn from that, but no, I was raised that way. Lies, secrets. I grew up with my aunt and my sister Linda reading tarot cards. They were always into astrology, horoscopes, birthdays, numerology, and many other occult practices. I once went to a palm reading. Now, I didn't normally pay for things like that because, as I mentioned, my family did it for me. My mother-in-law at the time took me and paid for it. I felt it was a crock, unlike what I was taught. I did caught one of those psychic lines as well. I remember the lady asking me what I was calling for, and I got irritated. I said she was the psychic. She should know, and I hung up. I don't know what I was looking for or expecting. I guess I figured if she was truly spiritual, she would have said a magic word, but they talk to the dead for the dead. My Aunt Cat read tarot. She was my favorite growing up, but I did not really know her. I spent lots of time with her and my mom. She had a son a few years younger than me, but she was who I came to visit. She was a seamstress as well and made me a dress for a dance. I spent lots of time with her. She even lived around the corner from us for a bit, which made visiting easier. She was my mom's youngest sister. Although my mom had 10 siblings, I only knew two, my Aunt Cat and my Uncle Jay. They all moved from California many years earlier. I knew my Aunt Cat had 6 children in all, but only one was still young enough to live at home. When my cousin, Aunt Cat's youngest daughter, came to visit, I was around 16. I thought that the oldest had moved away because they were older. However, my aunt refused to see her daughter and had me take her to the bus stop. My cousin was about a year or so older than me, so she was not old enough to be living on her own. I assumed she lived with her dad. I was not told that my aunt refused to see her. I was just asked to escort her to the bus stop. It was not until I was older that I found out about my aunt's past. She had 4 other children, and I think each one had a different dad. My aunt had been married several times. She seemed to meet the men at the bars where she worked. When she moved to Texas, she had 4 children. When she left for work one day, she left them with the babysitter and never came back. Her oldest son went to live with his dad, and the 3 girls were adopted out through foster care. My cousin that showed up to see her was one of the ones who were adopted by another family. My Aunt Cat went back to California for a bit and then eventually ended up in Texas again, remarried and with their son. For years, I talked with my cousins she abandoned, and I felt guilty because I spent quality time with her mother. It hurt my heart that she did that to her children. Did I tell you my maternal grandfather was an atheist? I don't know much about my grandparents on either side. All but one had passed by the time I was born, and my last living grandparent died a few months after my birth. My mother said her mother was a believer in God, however, she read tarot cards all the time. My mother's dad was an atheist, so my mother's side was steeped in the occult. My mom once told me that when she was a young girl that they would play with the Ouija board. She recalled a time as a teenager when they were playing with it in the woods in Mississippi. She said they opened or released something in the woods that day and never played again. A lot was going on in her family at this time. One of her brothers, her favorite, Bob, was sick and dying. She says she was unable to see him in the last few days because her mother was shielding her. I feel like that these moments of confusion are when the devil likes to come in. She did not say whose board it was, but possibly it was the friends she was with that day. Imagine if God was introduced during that time instead of evil, my life might have looked different. If we are not praying for our family, the devil is preying on them. My dad once told me that tracing back our family history, we had many women who were burned at the stake for being witches. This was after our family had sailed across the ocean from Europe. His mother was not a Christian, and I was told that my grandfather, before he died from cancer, had found the Lord. Many of my family members refer to Grandpa as being religious. I think Grandpa's last couple of years of being sick and finding the Lord showed my dad's younger brothers that it was okay to seek Jesus. They were the only blood relatives that were Christian. My dad's youngest brother became a minister later in his life. The light was pushing through the cracks of our family. The devil could not keep us in the dark forever. If I had known Jesus in my first marriage, I would still be married. Most people don't admit that, but he and I both know it is the truth. God can transform hearts and homes when we fight for change. If we don't care to change or even know we can, then we don't fight for change. Fasting is fighting for change. Fasting is telling the Lord you mean business. Fasting is showing the Lord you care enough to leave this world behind and do his work. If you are not fighting for your family, then who is? I will tell you who is, the devil, and his fight is much easier when we neglect Jesus.